So, I guess we'll start with just, before we talk about the book, just talk about you. How are you doing?
So how am I doing? I'm really enjoying myself. We just talked about the fact that the COVID pandemic resulted in a lot of people moving back into town, and my son moved back, and it's great being reunited with him and doing things. So he's a big cyclist, as am I. So we get to go biking together, which is a lot of fun. And having the book come out is really exciting. I spent 5 years on it, so it's like a validation. So people ask me how I felt when the book came out. Was I nervous? Was I concerned? And I said, I'm elated. Not only that, but I don't have to work on it anymore, which is nice. And it's been a good summer and a lot of exciting things happening at work. So yeah, I've been enjoying myself, and physically I'm in pretty good shape, which is always nice to wake up in the morning and feel good.
Yeah. What inspired the book for you?
I actually started writing the book in my mind while I was in the intensive care unit, because I realized that I had this unique perspective as a doctor, as an administrator, and as a scientist, and now as a patient, to really enlighten people with what are the important aspects of care. And the book's a self-help book. It's really designed to help people as early as can be in the whole process, because it's an enormous burden having a major chronic disease, and finding the resources and making good choices. It's not very easy. And so I said, I'm going to write a book that'll make it clear to people what the choices are and what they can talk to their doctors about and expect from their doctors and the medical team. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to take my experience and translate it through the eyes of a doctor and somebody who ran a hospital, to bring the issues to clarity and enable people then to have a plan. So a lot of the book is about planning, both for the present and the future. And I think that makes people feel a lot more at ease in terms of how overwhelming it is. And a lot of people miss out on their rehabilitation or don't take advantage of what there is to offer because they just get overwhelmed and decide, I'm just going to stay home, it's safer.
It seems unique in that you're blending the physical advice along with the mental health advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. So actually the beginning of the book is all about the psychology of an acute injury. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'd be sleeping at night and suddenly I'd wake up having hit my head on a beam or banged it on something. And those were all recollections of what had happened. And it turns out when you look at all the evidence, about 50% of people who have any one of these injuries, a stroke, a traumatic brain injury, or a spinal cord injury, about 50% of them have an anxiety disorder, and PTSD is one. And about 50% of them have depression, and about 25% have both. And so the psychology is really the earliest problem and probably the biggest problem that people face. And in a number of specialists actually recommend starting their patients on antidepressants as soon as they medically can tolerate them, because it takes quite a while for those antidepressants to work. And it's right at the very beginning when you're trying to recover some of your capabilities that you most benefit from therapy. And if you're depressed and not in the mood to go to therapy, you miss out on a great opportunity. So I agree with the experts. I think starting on an antidepressant is a good idea.
Correct me if I'm wrong, there's kind of the underlying cause of depression, and that can be chemical or post-traumatic stress. There's also the conscious aspect to get over too. You have hopes and dreams that align with being having a certain amount of physicality,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just almost logical. How do you work with that change?
Right. So there's a famous author on grief, Ellen Kubler-Ross, and she goes through 5 stages of grieving for a loss, and that's really what you go through. There is this sudden loss of what you viewed your life to be, and you have to grieve for that loss, and you have to recover from the grief, and then you can go and really take advantage of what you have. And so I think it's perfectly normal to grieve for what happened, and it's a hard thing. You have to have an acceptance. You have to get over the psychological damage. You have to view how you changed relative to the rest of your family and to society. So I think all of those become very important aspects of the first year or so, which is to grieve. And I think once you get out of that, it becomes clear what your options are in terms of moving forward.
In that respect, do you feel that you've grown as a person?
Enormously. Probably one of my biggest growth areas was in patience, not as in being a patient, but as in having patience. When you're independent and fully healthy, you can pick yourself up and go and do whatever you want. But if you're in a big old wheelchair like this, it's not nearly so easy. And you realize that you really do have to learn how to wait in a way that's not stressful. Sometimes waiting is very stressful, and so learning how to mellow out is pretty important. So in the book I talk a lot about meditation and mindfulness, which are ways you can focus your brain while you're doing something to get rid of the stress. And so I think that was, for me, one of the biggest areas I learned about was patience. And I learned also a lot about reaching out to people, being more proactive in terms of saying hello to people. So I still go back and forth in the hospital at Strong on a routine basis, and I say hi to everyone as I'm going by them, because I think it makes people feel good to be recognized. And I started a program at Strong when I came back called Patient Family Centered Care that really embodied the things that I learned about how you and your family should be taken care of. And I think it was a change in me, because I realized that a lot of the things that we do routinely in medicine don't have to be done exactly at that time. And so the example I use is getting a morning chest x-ray. So that doesn't sound so bad, but if you're stiff and can't move very well, and they take this ice cold chunk of metal encased film and prop it up behind your back and then move you around, it's not a pleasant experience. And if you're having a rough day, a good nurse or your own doctor should say, we can do it in the afternoon, we don't have to do it now. And so I think there's a lot of changing the way we view medicine and making it much more attentive to what the patient needs than we do. I think everybody who goes into healthcare is compassionate. We don't have to teach people how to be compassionate, but how to be attentive so that they can, give their compassion at the right time, and to not just stamp a routine on every patient. That's a big aspect of what I talk about in the book, and also what we do at Strong and Highland the other hospitals we're affiliated with.
You've also been leading the NeuroRestoration Institute. What's one of the more exciting elements or pieces of research or projects that's been going on there?
Right. Well, it's actually just starting. It took quite a while to get all the elements together. So the first thing we had to decide really is what kind of trials we were going to do and which kind of patients we're going to focus on. And so we're actually focusing on stroke because just in Monroe County alone, there's about 1,000 strokes a year. There's about 25 to 35 spinal cord injuries a year. And for traumatic brain injury, there's this whole spectrum from, getting your bell rung, as they say in football, to having your brain swell from hitting your head really hard. And so stroke is the focus because there are lots of people with strokes. And stroke has a more stereotypical presentation. So you can, I think almost any layperson can tell if someone's had a stroke because you can see that one half of their body doesn't move very well. And so the thing I'm excited about is how to help recovery in stroke. And we developed a platform, which is a kind of robot that we're going to use to help people regain function of their upper extremity. And then we'll combine that with other treatments to see what the synergies are across those. So the first trial is going to start September 1st, and it involves this kind of like Tesla type futuristic thing called transcranial magnetic stimulation, where we put like a king's crown on you. It's about this wide, and it generates a magnetic field in your brain, and that unlocks the ability of your brain to change the way it functions. So we're excited about that one. And ultimately we want to have 3 or 4 trials at a time going on here, and we'll start expanding out of stroke once we have that really made into a good routine. So I'm very excited about that. It's a collaboration across the whole state, so we're working with a group in Albany and a group down in White Plains, and we'll have a statewide stroke network for studying this.
Overall, when it comes to these types of injuries, I'm sure people ask you this all the time, but the goal, of course, is to get people back up and walking, whether it's through external means or even internal regeneration. Where are we with that right now?
Right. So the first thing I would say is get people back up and walking is what everybody assumes is what everyone wants. But actually, you doing a lot more with your hands. The quality of your life is really much more dependent on your ability to use your hands and arms. And so that's actually what we're going to start studying, is upper extremity. And I would say that we're making actually a lot of progress in getting people up and walking. That's actually simpler, because it turned out that just like lower mammals like rats and mice and even dogs, they actually have built-in systems that just work without your brain. They'll work just with the spinal cord to make a stepping motion and help you walk. And so we're tapping into that existing system to try to stimulate it to make your body get restored. And what's interesting is the spinal cord is a two-way thing. Not only the signals from your brain going down to your legs saying lift up your foot, put it down, it's also signals from your leg going back up to your brain saying we're in balance now, this is the right toe push, etc. And so I think we're going to see a lot of advances in devices that facilitate that transmission. And everything to artificial intelligence and to what are called exoskeletons, which are like robots that you wear. All these things are going to be tested in the next 10 years. So it's a dramatic time, I think, in neurorehabilitation.
My last question, and I suppose it relates to family and friends that I know. I'm hoping that this book could be an inspiration to people beyond just those who have suffered some type of spinal injury or stroke or something like that, neuro injury.
Yeah, I hope so, because there's lots of people who have problems